Today I will be installing a 22mm Perrin Front swaybar with SPC Camber bolts and RacerX front adjustable endlinks. Okay, this is what you will need to install the swaybar, endlinks, and camber bolts. You need a torque wrench that goes up to 120 foot-pounds, a smaller torque wrench for the lower ones, a body clip popper, a tape measure, a 6-inch extension, a small impact, a large impact, 19mm wrench, a 17 and a 15mm wrench, a ratchet, a light, a 10mm wobble, a 12mm wobble, a 12mm short, a 14mm wobble, a 14mm short, a, was it 16? 16mm wobble, a 16mm deep socket, a 17mm deep socket impact, an 18mm deep socket impact, and a 19mm deep socket impact. First step to doing this after you get your car jacked up and the front tires removed is to remove 3 body clips on each side, and then 8 12mm and 4 10mm to drop this skid plate. Is to remove this aero guard or aero panel. It is 8 12mm bolts. Okay, now that we got the panel dropped, we can remove this subframe support, I guess. It's 3 14mm bolts, and that will allow the sway bar to drop once we remove the end links. There's a body clip right here holding this piece of plastic onto the subframe thing. Just pull it out. I missed this bolt that's hidden behind this panel, so just get a 14mm socket and a wrench and just remove them, and then this will drop. This out, you should actually get a brace to brace this up. It makes this coming out a lot easier, or just use your knee. Some of these bolts are a little rustier than I'd like, so I'm just going to spray them with some PB Blaster and try to clean them up a little bit before I put them back in. So it turns out that they didn't really clean up that well. Might not be worth doing it, but, you know, why not? I'm going to try to just impact off the connection of the end link to the coilover with a 17mm. If not, then I'll get out the hex and the through socket. I have pulled out the sway bar and the subframe and the end links, and I'm putting them next to the Perrin 22mm and the Racer end links. I made them a little bit smaller than the stock one since I'm lowered a little bit. I'll probably have to expand them, but the middle of both heads I think is a good place to start. Remove this 14mm bolt. To remove this 12mm bolt there, and you will need an extension. The important part is to make sure that you have everything oriented properly. So I've removed all the bolts, and I can remove this like so, and then I can remove these like this, and then the sway bar will go in like this. Now that I cleaned up the mount, or the brace and the mount thing, we apply this lubricant to both sides of the bushing and then mount it. Greased both sides of the bushing and this, and now it's time to just assemble them and make sure you have the right orientation. The bolt that you want to put in is this 14mm, and then flip it over and put in this 12. You torque this one down to 30 and the other one down to 15. The next step is to install the end link on the furthest hole for the soft setting, and it goes in here, and you eventually torque it down to 45 pounds. Put in these bolts. One thing you need to make sure is the end link is over the steering. I had it underneath of it and had to pull the sway bar back out so I could get it up, and like this. Now torque these to 44 foot-pounds, I believe, is what the manual says. Is to put the bolt back in there and torque that one down to 44 foot-pounds also. This is a 16mm deep socket and a 15mm wrench back there, and torque this to 45 foot-pounds. The thing you want to do is torque this down to 45 foot-pounds. You put a 15mm wrench back here, or sorry, a 16mm socket here and a 15mm wrench there. And then do the same for up here. Torque this down, you're probably going to have to shorten your end link all the way. Once you torque both of them down, I left them at about 8.5 inches, and I'm going to adjust it once I take it off the jack. The bottom of the sway bar is a little too close for my comfort to the control arm, so I might end up shortening it some. Install the camber bolt on the bottom one, and first to do that, we need to loosen this with a 19mm impact, and then we have a 19mm on the bottom and a 19, and totally remove the bottom. You might have to hit this bolt out with a brass hammer. It makes it a lot easier if you turn your wheel all the way in. Now what we want to do is put the camber bolt in the bottom, and you want to have the lobe right there facing inwards, and this tab right here facing outwards, and then you torque it down to 97 foot-pounds. The bottom camber bolt down to 97 foot-pounds, and that's an 18mm socket, and that's a 15mm wrench. What you do is put this back on with the 10 mils, and then put this, the metal one up here, on with the 10 and the 12s. Okay, we got all the screws in. Now we're just going to put the 6 body clips in and then lower the car. Okay, now we're going to put the wheels on, and we're going to tighten the lugs as tight as we can, and we're going to put it back on the ground and torque the lugs to 90 foot-pounds. Okay, now that the car is on and lowered, you are going to turn the wheel full lock and look to see what the sway bar has enough clearance, which in this case it does, and then you are going to tighten the nuts on the end link. Okay, now we tightened up the end links, we are going to go for a ride, and this should be about 3.5 degrees native camber in the front, and we're going to listen for clunks or anything that's out of the ordinary. And then if that's fine, we take it to get aligned and corner balanced. That I have a little bit of a oil leak. It was not an exhaust leak. It's off of one of the seals on the driver's side. I believe it's a pretty common problem, so I'm just going to spray this off before I put it back on with some brake clean. So I found 2 spots. It's on the cover seal. It's right here on the driver's side. It's not really that bad. It's not even dripping. And then the other one is over here on the passenger side. And as you can see, it's pulling a little bit. I'm just going to clean it up with a towel and a little degreaser. It's really not that bad. I also might need to get a new oil pan screw. It seems to be just like seeping just a tad bit. Essentially cleaned up most of the oil seepage for now. It doesn't look that bad.